I'm Bernard Bermudez, Vice President, Downtown Sales Manager of Nevada State Bank. On behalf of Nevada State Bank, I'd like to welcome you to today's Insight webinar, which is presented through nevadabusiness.com. My background is in small business banking. I've become involved recently in an exciting new project with Nevada State Bank, helping startups and entrepreneurs in downtown Las Vegas. My role is to work closely with new business owners and prospective owners to help them round out their business plans and take advantage of all their financial options. I'm happy to be here today so we can all get some insights from people who are helping establish Nevada business every day. Now I'd like to introduce the rest of the panel. Next to me is Gina Bonjovi. Gina Bonjovi of the Gina Bonjovi Law Firm here in Las Vegas. Gina's practice is dedicated to serving small business, and she has helped many local people set up their own companies and get started in business. She's also the chairman of Vegas Young Professionals, which is associated with the Las Vegas Metro Chamber of Commerce. Thanks for being with us, Gina.
Thank you for having me.
Next to Gina is Andy White, who's an angel investor and the fund manager for the Vegas Tech Fund. He is also the executive director for Boom Startup, a business accelerator program based in Salt Lake City. As founder and board president of School Center, he knows what it takes to build a company from the ground up. Thanks, Andy, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Next to Andy, we have Jenny Goss, who's the chief marketing officer of Tracky, an open social collaboration platform. She has 15 years of experience in building startups, developing software products, and digital marketing. Jennifer has worked with several startups and has helped raise millions of dollars in funding for them. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules, and welcome to all of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So the topic today is starting a business in Nevada. Our panel will go over the details of setting up your business the right way to help you on the path to a successful launch. If you have questions for the panel, please submit them on Twitter using the hashtag NSBWebinar. Without further delay, let's get started. So Gina, I wanted to see if you could tell us a little bit about structuring a business.
Well, the first question that most people ask me is whether or not they should form a business or whether they should operate as a sole proprietor. So when you operate as a sole proprietor, you and your business are one and the same. So heaven forbid anybody sue your business or sue you for something that comes out of your business, they can get at your personal assets, which becomes a problem. So the reason you form an entity like an LLC or a corporation is to create a separate bucket into which those business assets are kept so that anybody suing you and winning can only get at those assets in the business bucket and can't get at the assets in your personal bucket.
And what about incorporating? And can you talk a little bit about that process as well?
Sure. The process of starting a business starts with basically choosing a name and making sure first, very important, that nobody else has it. I have a lot of clients that come to me and they either choose names that are already taken or they are halfway into their business and they find out that their name has been taken. So you want to be very careful that the name hasn't already been taken. Then you want to choose your business address, which the reason I put that at the top of the list is because the business address is one of the only pieces of information that goes on every single form. It tends to be expensive to change it. So if you get that nailed down first, then you file your entity information at the Secretary of State, which means your articles of organization if you're an LLC or your articles of incorporation if you're a corporation, your initial list of members or officers, and then you get your state business license. Then you take all that, cut me off if you're bored. Then you take all that, you go to the Nevada Department of Taxation, and you register for either a sales tax permit or a use tax permit, depending on whether you're selling tangible goods. Then you take all of that to the local business license bureau, depending on where your business is actually located. And you may or may not need a fictitious firm name from the county in which your business is located, and you need one if you plan to operate your business under a name that's different from the one registered with the Secretary of State.
Okay. And Andy, I know that you work with a lot of startups here in Las Vegas. Considering the process, would you advise some of our startups to seek someone like Gina for help?
Absolutely. It's very important from the beginning to have good legal advice and also financial advice. Make sure that you get everything set up and established correctly the first time. It will never get easier to fix issues with things like that, and those are the types of things that can really hurt in the future if you don't have a good foundation.
Right. And going back to you, Gina, can you talk to us a little bit about Nevada and the benefits of incorporating a state like Nevada?
Nevada's a really great state. Number one, the most obvious reason is we don't have any state income tax. So that's a nice benefit. The other nice benefit is that the Nevada legislature basically took, anybody who went to business school knows that Delaware is widely regarded as the place to form your business, especially if you have a high growth startup. And the Nevada legislature recognized this, and so they have taken Delaware law basically in whole and plugged it right into the Nevada revised statutes to create a more business-friendly environment. We also have a business court here, which is staffed with judges who are very well versed in some of the business matters. So the cases that are filed in business court, while it's a little bit more expensive to litigate something in business court, the judges tend to move things a lot faster. They bring themselves more up to speed on the issues of the case. So you can get to a resolution much faster than you could in other jurisdictions.
And Jennifer, could you also add to that regarding doing business here in Nevada and the benefits of it? Because you work with a lot of startups yourself.
Yeah, it actually, the business environment is a big reason why my husband and I did move here about 16 years ago. And we have started a number of businesses here in Nevada. A lot of them are tech related, but no matter what industry you're in, I do think that like you're talking about, Gina, all the benefits from the business aspect to state income tax, and even there's things like its proximity to California, to major metropolitan areas without having to necessarily be there and have that cost of living or that infrastructure necessarily for your business. There's a lot of good things here. I also think that there's sort of a pioneering spirit still in the city. And I think that is a good thing depending on what you're attempting to do. But I know for us that's always been one of the reasons to keep us here besides the actual business structure and climate. Sure.
Andy, you want to talk a little bit about that pioneer spirit? We were speaking earlier about that.
Absolutely. Entrepreneurism is a hot topic these days, but really it's been a part of our country from the beginning, and in particular in Nevada. We're a very young state. Las Vegas is a very young city, and everything that's here has been built up over the years. And so the history of what we have is much different than in some other areas of the country, but it's very strongly tied to change and risk. And I think that carries over into the businesses that we're seeing today.
And Gina, some of our businesses wonder which type of entity they should set up. Could you talk about the different types of corporations that are available to them?
Sure. There are a whole bunch of different entities, from an LLC to an LLP to an LLLP to a corporation to a professional corporation to a PLLC, all sorts of different things. Probably 98% of the people I deal with are either an LLC or a corporation. And so I typically default to putting people into an LLC unless there are a couple things are true. Number one, they are planning on bringing in investors and they want to do sophisticated things with offering different classes of shares, preferred stock versus common stock, which you cannot do with an LLC. There are also some restrictions if you are dealing with foreign investors. Foreign investors don't typically want to deal with an LLC. They're more familiar with a corporation, particularly if you are dealing with investors who are a little old school, because the LLC is, relatively speaking, a pretty young form of entity that a lot of the older generation are not really sure how to deal with it, that it's actually both the LLC and the corporation provide the same amount of liability protection, and it's right in the Nevada statutes, but it's sort of depending on what you want to do with the business, which is one of those things about having your exit strategy in mind when you start a business, which is sort of counterintuitive.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that, because sometimes I've seen some business owners where they're uncertain how to go about their business. Can you talk about the exit strategy and how that can help them along the way?
Sure. Having your exit strategy in mind when you start, while it does sound counterintuitive, is very important. I mean, even down to something as simple as choosing your business name, because you, for example, don't necessarily want to, call it, Gina's Mobile Detailing Service if I intend to build it up and sell it one day, or I don't want to say Las Vegas something or other if I eventually want to expand to another city. So having the idea of whether you want to build up your business and sell it, which Andy and Jennifer are very familiar with, or whether you want a legacy business, which is something that you pass down to your children, or whether you want just a lifestyle business where it sort of makes you enough money to be able to do the things you want to do, pay your bills, and still have a healthy work-life balance. So So having that in mind is really important when you're determining your business name, how you want to structure it, how you want to manage it, and how you want to fund it, and who you put in place as managers, what kind of entity. It goes into all those decisions.
Perfect. Well, we know that you've invested a lot of time with our small businesses here in Las Vegas, so thank you. We'll transition over to Andy. Andy, you've been doing some great work also with our startups in Vegas, in particular building up our downtown area. Could you speak a little bit about what you've been doing, and also maybe the finding finances for some of our early stage and the early stage process?
So we have a very rapidly growing startup community, and when we look at startups, a majority of those have some sort of tech associated with that, and the reason for that is that's where some of our greatest potential comes for highly scalable, rapid growth companies. Now, this is just a piece of the economy. It's not everything. There's a lot of other great businesses that you can start, but it is the area that we are focused on as a part of the ecosystem. The teams that we're seeing today have huge advantages over previous years, where the infrastructure costs are greatly reduced. You can do a lot more with a lot less and really start to build up your traction at early stages. Now, on the downside, there's a lot more competition out there that's rapidly changing as well. So it makes it that much more important for teams to really get to know their customer early on, test as much of their hypothesis as they can before they build product, and make sure that when you do spend the resources on developing that product, that you're doing the right things at the right time.
And Jennifer, I don't want to leave you out in the conversation. I wanted to say that I know that you've been seen by some as innovators to a social media and communication revolution. So could you speak a little bit about the process as well, to comment to what Andy said?
Well, I appreciate that. That's a nice way of encouraging anyway for an entrepreneur to hear that. I think when you do start a business, you are trying to disrupt something. Maybe you're trying to do something better. Whether you're developing a dry cleaning business all the way to high tech, like Andy was talking about, and this climate here, I think that if we're talking about startups, that's one subject, but maybe startups in Nevada or startups in Las Vegas, there is just so much potential here going on with the resources that we have. I mean, I know Gina, you've been so involved in helping startups at startup weekends, and Andy obviously, and the Vegas Tech Fund and Downtown Project, Rob Roy and Switch and the Innovation Center, but just these kind of groups that will help you, whether it's lean startup methodology or if it's mentorship, actually structuring a business, setting it up, figuring out what you need to do as you're building and growing and thinking about what you want to do. That's always going to help you. This community will help you determine whether you really can innovate, whether you really can kind of break outside of a box and become successful in whatever industry you want to be in. So I like that, as this community grows, I think, Andy, it kind of talks to your point about really testing the market and seeing if you have a viable technology or product before you put too much investment and time into it. This community, and hopefully wherever you are, you can find at least some mentors and some other businesses that will help you kind of develop your own community and lead you towards innovation and hopefully success.
Thank you. And I know a lot of Nevada businesses, Andy, are thinking about financing. So how do we know when you're ready to ask for financing?
Yeah, so there's two keys to that. One is your type of business appropriate for the type of financing you're going after? So we've talked a little bit about the difference between a small business and a startup. Typically, you would need to be a startup with a high growth potential in order to get VC funding, just because of the mechanics behind VC funding. Now, on the other side of it, if you're starting up a small business where you have some assets, then you're more likely to be able to do more traditional financing. Or in any case, you can always do a friends and family round where you have people that you're much closer to, that know your industry, and have trust and faith in your ability to execute. And that's where most of the things start. And that's the great part about today, is that even if you're wanting to start a small retail type of business, you can test that online or within your community on a very small scale and still have a potential to grow it to a great business.
Perfect. And after you get the money, Jennifer, what are some of the things that, that go on, and how it helps change your business along the way?
Well, I think that's a great question. No matter where you are, whether it is VC funding or friends and family or your own investment, it really does, if you think that it took a lot of work to get there, that is just barely the beginning. So I kind of liken it to, you kind of sprint to maybe, get your product to market, and then it's like this marathon. And it's, obviously having your business strategy in place beforehand is extremely important. It might not be in the form of a traditional business plan like, in the past, but you're going to have your business model in some form. And if you've raised investment, you should have your business model, your pro forma, basically your plan of action for hopefully the next 5 years at least. So you just start executing, and it really is all about that. And I think that once you get funding, it's all the more important that the people, the service providers, the team members, whoever it is that you're working with, even your investors, are really well suited to your growth plan for your company. So it's a great journey, but I mean, you have to enjoy the journey because it is an adventure, and it does take a lot, obviously, to start a business and to maintain it, and hopefully drive it to success. But
so how do we enjoy that journey? How do you stay passionate along the way? And that's for anybody,
yeah.
But Jennifer, if you could start.
Absolutely. Well, I think there's a lot of ways that you can do that. I think depending on what you're doing, sometimes, for instance, getting involved in this community in the last couple of years for David and I. Been here 16 years. We've gotten involved in the tech community a little bit here and there, but there hasn't been anything as well formed and as really passionate and as large a community as there is now. So we do build businesses. We love what we're doing. We're super passionate about Tracky. But sometimes you are in the trenches, and there's actually this wonderful benefit of getting out and being amongst other entrepreneurs, and basically sharing your stories with each other, and that's reviving. So helping a community, being involved in the community, both giving to it and hopefully learning from other entrepreneurs, I think is a really great way to kind of recharge you, and it teaches you things as well. So there's that double benefit where you're kind of getting outside of your box in the way that you think, and then you're also learning from other people. So I think that's one great way, but there's a lot of great ways that you can recharge along the way.
Gina, recharging, what do you think?
I recharge by talking to people who work for big firms, which I think is sort of analogous to anybody who's, if you are entrepreneurial minded, and if you really just want to be your own boss, no matter how trying the process is, when you talk to people who are, doing the 9-to-5 thing, and we as entrepreneurs, we eat, sleep, and breathe what we do. We don't clock out and leave it at work. It follows us everywhere. But if you're passionate about what you do, then that's good. And so when you talk to people who aren't passionate about what they do and they're just kind of going through the grind, that's a reminder, at least for me, of why I'm doing this and why I eat, sleep, and breathe my firm, and why I try to help the startups and people starting their small businesses, because I want them to have that same freedom.
Yes.
Right, and thank you. And Jennifer, you all have started a mentoring program where you're funding and helping nurture tech startups here in Las Vegas. I wanted to hear a little bit more about mentoring and what type of resources are out there and what you all are doing in that aspect for our startups.
Well, I really believe, excuse me, I really believe in the power of community. I really, really do believe in finding like-minded people with whatever it is that you're doing. We are talking about tech. I mean, that is my perspective, but I do understand that, you could be in an entirely non-tech business, but very hands-on, people resource type business, and some of the same laws would apply. You need to find, and I think one great thing about this community is, over the past couple of years, the people that really do give back, that are really concerned about the community, like Gina and like Andy, they've revealed themselves. And so it's wonderful if you can basically pull those people together, and other, people that are willing to actually do another project, yet another project, and yet give back some more, and see if there is the potential that we can pull all of our resources together within a community and try to give small businesses and startups
the advice that they need as quickly as possible in order to execute as quickly as possible. So trying to take away some of the, well, I don't know where to go for, I don't know the right attorney, I don't know how to incorporate, I don't know what my business or my corporate structure should be, where do I get team members, how do I build my product, how do you even build a performer, all of these that seem really like maybe detail things, but they're very big as you were talking about structuring your company properly from the beginning. And we've actually seen a lot of startups that didn't know that, and their ignorance actually does hurt them in the long term, and it can actually prevent them from even getting their product to market or maybe scaling like they need to. So, our goal is really just to help, is to be a resource in the community, because we think there's so many great rock stars here in every industry really that can help build successful businesses. And so trying to bring those resources together under one umbrella and offer that to companies and startups that are interested in going to that umbrella of resources and seeing if we can dispel some of the problems that happen early on, especially when it might be your first time, maybe you're entering a new market, you don't have the answers you need.
Right.
And if you take too much time to get those answers, you could actually fail to launch, before you even begin. And so we're wanting to see just this community grow and become something really sustainable for the long term. And so it's just to see if we can help, propel that along in one minor way. And there's so many things like this going on, though.
Well, we appreciate that mentorship that you're doing. Andy, you have revealed yourself, as Jennifer said. Mm-hmm. So with that said, when there's business owners asking about how to ask for financing, especially when they're in their startup process, what do you actually need before you come to the table?
So the key term in that these days is traction. Now that can mean a variety of different things for different businesses and different industries. But the main concept there is showing that you can execute and that you can test and learn, so that whichever metric you're using, it's beginning to increase so that you know that you're getting better and better. And that needs to be very continuous and then also rapid. So the first part of that is discovering something that you can replicate and then showing that you can replicate it, whether that's a new market or a new customer set or a new channel. And then the ultimate goal for that is to be able to tell your story for scale so that you can go out for the next big round and really turn up the volume and create that high growth business that can expand to a variety of different areas.
And if I was listening to this program today, where can I go to get some of these resources?
Well, that's the great part of the day and age that we live in. You're probably carrying around a device with you that has all of this information available. It's really not a matter of where to get it or is it available. It's taking the time to read up on it and to put the resources towards learning. The knowledge is out there. Things are changing so rapidly that we're almost getting to a point where the books are getting outdated by the time they're published. That's one of the keys that we've found with even our mentoring type programs, where historically a mentor is someone who has had an exit and now has time to give back, and they start working with the companies. Unfortunately, things are changing so rapidly that those individuals, once they get out of the business, they're not able to keep up with the new changes. And so the new mentor is actually your peer who just went through that situation most recently and can offer timely advice about what has just happened. And so that makes the value and the importance of community that much greater, and the opportunity for a community to exponentially grow is greater now than ever before. And so that's really the exciting part of where things are going, is that it doesn't have to be the known expert in the field. It can be the person at the desk next to you that has just experienced that issue and knows the best way to solve it.
Gina, when a startup approaches you early on in the process, how often do they come back to see you, and is that something that you recommend to the business owner?
I mean, ideally, I want to see people. I would like to keep in contact weekly, because I think there are a lot of decisions that you make, especially early on when you're just forming a business, that if you step just a little bit to the side, the trajectory ends up taking you way off the path that you're on. So I like to be in contact with my clients as much as possible in the early stages. Once they kind of get going, and especially when we bring in other mentors, whether it's other professionals or other people who are in the industry that can kind of nurture that business and help them along, give them a little bit of guidance, then I can step back, and I still like to be in contact with them only so they don't go signing something that they shouldn't or agreeing to something that they shouldn't. But I don't always, I need to like bug their houses or their offices to make sure that that stuff doesn't happen. But as much as possible early in the process.
Sure. And Jennifer, you talked earlier about the resources that are around us. How do you go about finding the right resource, and how do you find yourself aligning with the right people?
Mm-hmm. I think what Andy said is actually a really good start. I mean, finding other entrepreneurs in your industry or having a similar trajectory to what you're planning is a great place to start. People that maybe, for this city have been here long enough to kind of have known, where those resources are and how they perform. I mean, what Gina talked about, that's the way you want your attorney to think, is that, protect you and to be proactive instead of reactive. So it's not always easy to find that, on your own. So I would say save yourself a lot of time and headaches, and don't try to do that on your own. Internet's a great resource. You can go look up, resources all day long and go visit them and sign contracts with all sorts of service providers. But probably the best way is to actually ask other people, who they recommend, and be very specific. Not just about, well, I need to incorporate my business, but I have this type of business, I want, I have this sort of growth plan for my company, I plan to hire this many people, and ultimately I think we're going to expand into these states. Or, it can change then the types of, the advice that you get in return. Mm-hmm. So, and then, finding other groups within your community that are focused on truly, truly helping and giving back, not necessarily paying a fee to go there and get people that are interested only in the monetary side. You want people that are truly interested, hopefully, in building an ecosystem within maybe your city, your community, or your industry. And then that their interests are not just, purely the capital part of working with you.
Sure. How about the online social communities and how to...
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's a great point, that if you, we're talking about this community a lot, but if you don't have that where you are, do use the internet, and you'll find communities in some of the strangest places, really. It could be a Reddit community, and you just find some great entrepreneurial advice there, or maybe it is about how to get customers or how to gain traction or whatever. But yeah, use the internet that way, and again, find people that maybe you would like to shadow or become like that company, and see how they did it and see who they used. And just generally, if you just come with some honest questions, people are willing to ask, or willing to help you. So ask, And
Andy, how do you find a good advisor? What are the type of things that you personally look for?
Well, as in most things, it's all about relationships, and the key there is forming a true relationship. It's not networking, it's not exchanging a business card, it's actually being able to create that connection with the individual. We found that the best way to do that is to take the time to really get to know the person and understand some ways that you might be able to help them. And it doesn't always have to be directly from you. It can be an introduction that you make, or something that ends up happening in a couple of weeks or a couple of months later that you just never know, where you might run into someone and be able to connect them. And as you build out that network, then you get a better understanding of how you can help, they get a better understanding of how they can help you, and then you get to the point where you can actually have that exchange, build that mentor relationship, and be able to grow with each other. But it's very important to make sure that that's built on the right foundation and with the right person. And it's not always going to be the person that you've heard of out in the community that you think would be the best one. There's a lot of people out there that have some great skills and insights that are just plugging away at it day after day and would love to have an opportunity to help, and they're just not sure how to either. We're all human. We love to communicate, and there's so many different opportunities out there that we're just not taking advantage of yet.
I'm going to scale you all back to when you first started, and if you could share maybe some of the lessons that you've learned along the way that you could share with the group. Jennifer?
I feel like, okay, well, finding the right people is such a huge thing. I mean, I just reiterate what Andy just said, it is in building relationships, but I would say that having some way, like when you start a business, you're usually so passionate, you just think that everything's going to go fantastic, you're going to be successful. You know, everyone you hire is going to be the perfect employee. Everyone you work with is going to love your company and they're going to want to do the best job possible for you and all those sorts of things. And I think over time you learn that maybe we could have vetted some things a little bit better, a little bit differently. Maybe we could have realized, like Andy, even if you're starting out and you feel like you have all of these needs as a startup entrepreneur that you should give before you try to, you know, not get in, you know, just monetarily, but just, yeah, okay. You need all of this stuff. So it's hard to kind of get out of that perspective and say, maybe I should just slow down. And if I use a little bit more time and try to figure out who the right relationships are, whether I can help in these maybe key areas, I think that what you'll learn from that and the relationships you'll gain from that are so much more valuable than maybe that month in the market that you would have gained otherwise. I mean, I'm just talking generally, so.
Thank you. Andy?
The number one key for me is to not get into a business just because you think it's a good way to make money. The road to success is fraught with potholes, and if that's the only thing that you're using to drive you, you will burn out and give up very quickly. As much as you work with your coworkers, they will still come and go throughout the life cycle of a successful company. However, the one group that will not is your customer. And so the absolute key is to make sure that you found a customer, that you're passionate about solving their problem, because that's what's going to keep you going day after day as things ebb and flow throughout the life cycle of your company.
Tina?
That's a good one. I think the biggest lesson I learned is to acknowledge, I think as an entrepreneur, you feel some obligation to do everything yourself. Yeah. You have to handle all the aspects of the business yourself, and that there's some weakness associated with not being able to do that. And so when you're handling, you know, for a traditional business like mine, where you're handling the marketing and the administration, you're going out and building the business, then you're coming back and doing the business, and it can be very overwhelming. So I think what I would do over again is maybe have a come to Jesus discussion with myself, where I can't do it all, and delegate my weaknesses more quickly, acknowledge them more quickly, delegate them more quickly, and truly vet the people that I'm delegating them to.
You can't do everything by yourself.
No, and I only recently started doing that, and the freedom that I'm enjoying and the benefits that it has had not only for me but for my clients, it's remarkable. Right. So don't be afraid to admit that you don't know everything. It's okay.
Well, Andy, I'm going to go back to you. What are some of the biggest mistakes that startups make, and what are some of the biggest mistakes startups can make?
Right. So the two biggest reasons a startup fails is one, internal disputes between the founders. So it's very important to make sure that you get into business with people that you like, that you do have complementary skills. A lot of those conflicts will come from too many cooks in the kitchen or no trust within that relationship. And then the second most common is premature scaling. Trying to build out a product that's ready for millions of users before you even have one, and you end up burning all of your money on this great product before you even know if anybody wants it. And we see that happening time and time again. Again, I believe it goes back to human nature. We've been creating tools since we could walk upright, and so that's the first place that we go. But it's also the most resource-intensive thing, and the thing that's hardest to change. So the more you can do early on, whether it's in pen and paper or through conversations or testing through someone else's channel, then the more likely you are to be able to succeed once you do build that product. And it's one of those that we see over and over and over again, and I just don't have a magic something that I can say to help keep that, other than just be honest with yourself. When you're talking to that customer and you're truly not hearing what you need to hear to know that your solution is the right one, then you have to take them at their word and continue to discover what's the biggest problem you can go after, because it will do you no good to build that thing and try to force it on them.
Thank you. That was very helpful to our audience. And what about building a team? What are some qualities that you look for? Well, maybe some of the businesses that you've seen, the successful ones.
Well, it's sort of like what Andy said, it's important to choose the right people to team up with, and it's also very important to get those agreements in writing. Because I see, you know, even in traditional businesses, and especially in traditional businesses, the disputes will sink a ship. It doesn't matter how big your ship is. And when you don't have those agreements in writing, or you don't have something, the reason I like, and I'm not just trying to generate business for myself, the reason that contracts are so important is because the contract sort of stands separate from the people who signed it. And so each person can look at it, or the person who's trying to get the other person to change can say, hey, look, I signed this too, and I've been abiding by it, and I expect you to do the same. It sort of creates a separate scapegoat almost, so that you're not, it's no longer between the two people, it's between the promises that they both made to one another. I mean, and going into business with somebody is like getting married. And breaking up that business is like a divorce. And unfortunately, and especially when you're going into business with friends or family, it's far more likely that those disputes will become personal and will escalate if it's friends and family, because you have that added layer of kind of psychology over it that you have to be really careful. So to the extent that you can get those agreements in writing, to head off some of that stuff. And the division of labor, like Andy said, if you have people who are complementary to one another and they're not sort of cannibalizing one another with their skill sets, that's important too.
Right. Jennifer, what qualities do you look at?
I think shared vision is very, very important. You can hire someone with a great skill set, great experience, wonderful resume, and so they look like the perfect fit, but unless they're sharing your vision and making it their own and bringing to the table their vision, you know, and hopefully the two melding become better than those two separate. I think it's so important, because through the ups and the downs, if you do have the bigger picture in mind, it will, I think, help through lean times, through, you know, great times when everyone is working like crazy because there's great success going on in a company. So, and it also, I think, helps resolve disputes to some degree. It won't always get to the bottom of something if if something's very, very wrong. But if you can remember why you got involved and why you gave your life to something, and any small business, I think you're asking more of maybe your potential employees, even if you have them on a fixed schedule, than maybe you are in a large corporation that has all the resources in the world, you know, for the long term. So I think that, you know, having people kind of coming to the table together and making sure that we're on the same page of why we're doing what we're doing and where we want to go with this together, I think is really, really important.
Good.
I think one of the key mechanics that you have to help protect against that is a vesting schedule for all of the founders. If everything goes perfect the way that you expect it to, then everyone will vest, you'll all stay friends, and it will have the exact same result as if you had divvied up the equity on the first day. However, if things do go south and something happens, you just never know how life is going to change for somebody or which person that's going to happen to, then this gives you some protection that allows the company to continue on. When you do have those disputes, if you have a team member who's walking away from daily interaction at the company and they're taking 30% of the company away with them, it takes all of the incentive away from the rest of the team. So one person's change of mind can tank an entire company early on. With having a vesting schedule, then they've only earned the amount that they stayed for, and then you are able to redistribute the rest of that equity and have that opportunity to continue to grow and expand the company. So it's a great safety net, and there's really no downside to it at all, other than that unexpected, which the key behind the unexpected is that you don't know what that's going to be.
What great pointers. What about standing out? How does a business owner stand out from the rest?
Oh, sorry. I think the key for that is that passion for that customer and making sure that you stay focused on the problem that you're trying to solve. The easiest way to get lost in the shuffle is to be a me too, trying to do too many things for too many people. And there's just no way to differentiate. And that's becoming more and more important in today's economy. Your company will be worth significantly more to someone if you have a bigger share of a smaller market than if you have a really tiny share of a ton of markets. There's just very few companies that can utilize that type of asset. However, with a specific target market, things are getting more and more specialized as it's easier to start a business, and as we're able to get to more and more people around the globe that have those specific interests. And so that's a great place to start. You can always scale to other markets and replicate what you're doing, but the key to that differentiation is really being able to show that we understand who our customer is, we're able to connect and interact with them, and then get them to do a transaction with us and enjoy it.
Perfect. Well, we've got a question coming in from Debbie. She's asking, is it ever a good idea to borrow money from a family member to start a business? I'm getting a big smile from Jennifer. I'll go to you first.
It can be. If that's what you need to get your company off the ground. But I would always say to have the agreements in solid as if you were getting an absolute stranger to invest, and realize what this could do to your relationship in the future, but it certainly can be. I mean, that's how a lot of small businesses in America have started.
Sure.
So I think it just do it right. Don't say we trust each other and we love each other and we will never fight about money, because it can happen. And I've seen a lot of people go through that. So just get the structure right from the get-go.
Gina?
Put it in writing.
Yes.
Put it in writing, put it in writing, put it in
Yes.
writing. Treat the family member as if they're a stranger coming in from the street, or whether they're a bank. You know, treat them as if there is no personal relationship whatsoever, and get that in writing so that both sides are comfortable to the extent they can.
If you are the family member, assume that you will never see that money ever again, and that if you do get something back, then that's the bonus, and that's going to be the best foundation for that. And a key is that that family member actually has the money to give. That's why there are rules for accredited investors. The friends and family don't necessarily have to adhere to that because of the tight relationship, but there's a reason why it's important to make sure that the people have the money to give, and that they are able to continue keeping their means, even if that money were to be lost. It's still a risky business.
Well, thank you, Debbie, for that question. We have another question coming in from Ryan. How do you find out if someone else has already registered the business name that you want?
There are a couple different ways to check. There is the uspto.gov is the website for the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, and there you can search on trademarks to see if the name's been taken. Now, it's a little, the Trademark Office website is a little confusing because you'll see a lot of marks that are listed as live, which doesn't necessarily mean that they've been awarded the trademark. It just means that there's an application on file. And because the applications take at least a year to process, there's a big window there. So you want to first check there. Secondly, check with your state. You can search at the Secretary of State site, which is nvsos.gov, and you can search for people who filed state trademarks. And thirdly, Google it, because you'll find other uses. Just because somebody hasn't filed a trademark application or hasn't gotten a registered trademark doesn't mean that they don't have superior rights in the name if you were to come in and start using it. So you just want to make sure as much as possible, which is, I think, kind of speaks to the big trend in these nonsensical words that a lot of the high growth startups especially are using to name their businesses, because, I mean, let's face it, a lot of names have already been taken. So that's a very important thing to do, because you don't want to invest in, just the infrastructure, the licensing, the funding, the marketing, everything if you have a name that you'll eventually have to change.
If I could just add to that real quickly, another aspect depending on your business is actually checking to see if the name that you intend to register or are registering is also available on social media channels. We have seen, and we've been through this ourselves many times, but seen a lot of companies that they just fall in love with a name, they register it,
And then they go out and they try to get their Twitter account, their Facebook account, their Instagram account, and so on, and they can't because someone else has that name. And then you end up having, you can sometimes, using trademark, you can sometimes actually work with those entities to get that account back if you feel like someone is squatting on it or something like that. But have the whole picture in mind, especially in today's environment where your business could be dealing with customers on social media channels more than anywhere else. So having a consistent representation across those networks is really important as well.
Perfect. Kristen wants to know, I've heard it's important to do market research before starting a business. What's the best way to go about it?
So that to me, verbatim, is a potential issue in that if you're doing, depending on how you define market research, you may be looking at old data. So the trend for today is more focused on your customer and working with them. And the issue is, much like everything else, your customers' needs are changing very rapidly. And so it's very important for you to be as connected to them throughout this process as possible. And then you can go look for some data to help back that up and support it, which will be great. But really, those theories need to be based on the customers who you're wanting to work with, and not a report that was done 10 years ago through a census, or a paid report that you may not know what the real goals of that were. You can always find a statistic to support what you think you want to know. Unfortunately, it may not be the best data for you to actually be working off of.
Perfect. Gina?
I completely agree with Andy. I mean, traditionally in business school, you go to the journals and the book stacks and you look at this information. I mean, it can be, and I've seen with some of the tech startups that they'll be working on an idea that last week just came to market. You have to be sort of almost one step ahead of your customer, but at least in constant communication with your customer, whether you're sort of polling people on social media. I know a lot of the competitors at Startup Weekend will go to the airport to survey people, sort of real time, as fresh as possible, getting that information when it's relevant.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm hearing from Reno. Terry's asking, we know that the tech scene is growing here in Las Vegas, but what about the Reno area? Are the same kind of things going on there?
I've heard that there is a migration from Silicon Valley to a degree to Reno, and I think that makes a ton of sense for proximity. Certain resources or longevity. I know that we've dealt with some different groups up in Reno in past years, and they're probably, in some ways, there's more history there than Vegas in certain industries. But it would be wonderful to see, because it would be great to help each other out.
Sure. And Jim wants to know that if you start as a sole proprietor, how can you tell when it's time to hire your first employee?
Well, first you want to incorporate. And then there are a lot of ways to bring on help without necessarily hiring an employee. You have to be very careful about that, because the tendency is for businesses to bring on independent contractors so that they don't have to pay all the payroll taxes and unemployment insurance. But there are, like, the state uses a 3-step process or a 3-step analysis on whether a person is actually an independent contractor or an employee. So I guess it gets to the point where you are either overloaded with what you're doing, or when you get to the point where you realize that you have to delegate. And a lot of times if you're delegating something, you can delegate to another service provider and they're not necessarily an employee. It's when somebody is doing the same work that you're offering in your business. So if you're, as a law firm, if they're putting together letters or they're doing filing and it's sort of the foundation of what a law firm does, then they're considered an employee. So you want to be very careful about how you categorize those people, because not only is the state coming after people, but also the IRS.
Sure. Andy?
I guess the first question on that is, what were you doing as a sole proprietor? And if it is that type of business, then I agree totally with Gina. The best way to solve any of these is to think about it ahead of time to make sure that you're establishing the right type of company in the first place. And then typically with hiring, especially in an early stage company, you do that once it hurts. And you have to make sure that you really understand what that position will entail and the help that you need, and make sure that you're doing it and not hire too early. But it's a challenging decision to make, especially employee number one. You're giving up a lot of that responsibility that you're used to doing. It is your baby, and you're handing it over to the care of someone else. So it's one that you don't want to make a hasty decision on that.
Jennifer, when do you think it's a good idea to hand over that baby?
Yeah, I think along these lines for sure that it's a lot of responsibility to hire your first employee and all the employees after that, because no matter how much interest these people have in your company, you are the founder, and you now are responsible for someone else's livelihood. So it's a big decision to make from that perspective. But also I would say that if you're not quite sure, do use service providers. Do go and find the expertise, even if it's something as simple as marketing. There's a lot of companies that you can outsource your marketing to, social media management. If it's areas that you need to get into and you don't know how to do that job, I don't recommend hiring someone for that job. Find out what that job entails and then maybe go down that road. But it probably is best to at least test the waters with true service providers that are external components of your company. And then, when that hurts financially, then make that decision. And when you know enough about the job to properly hire the right person, then bring that in-house, because you will be happier in-house and you will get more. But you just don't want to jump into it too quickly.
Sure.
And I heard, if I could just add to that, I heard somebody say that any tasks that you're doing throughout the day, if they're not immediately revenue generating, delegate them. Mm-hmm. So what I did before I hired my first employee is start making a list of the things that I either hated to do, that I wasn't good at, or that weren't directly generating me revenue. And from that, I got a job description for an assistant.
And so that probably loves that job.
Right.
And it's just
finding the right person.
And she's amazing at it, right.
And that's a wonderful thing.
And so again, like what you were saying, is when you hire those service providers, you don't get into, it's a lot easier to break up. It's sort of like dating. It's a lot easier to break up with a service provider than it is with an employee. Yeah.
We're all for hiring employees, though, of course. I mean, I'm totally,
sure.
Because that's a beautiful, wonderful thing to have that kind of longevity and sustainability for someone in their own lives. Mm-hmm. But as a business owner, we want sustainable businesses, so kind of like testing the waters before you jump in is smart.
It looks like Zach is bringing some legal questions to the table. Are business licensing rules the same for web-based businesses and brick and mortar businesses?
Usually, yes. For web-based businesses, especially if you have any sort of e-commerce on your website, you still have to register for a sales tax permit. You still have to have all the same licensing. Usually the licensing categories will change because you won't necessarily have a physical retail, and that'll depend on the jurisdiction in which your business sits. So you might have an internet retailer. I know the city of Las Vegas has a category for internet retailer, but Clark County might just have general sales, or counties in the northern part of the state might have different categories. But typically everybody has to go through the same process.
Sure. And our last question from Kathy, what organizations are available for entrepreneurs to network and find mentors?
Mm-hmm. Now, are we talking locally or nationally? Because there's lots of options both ways.
Let's look at Nevada.
Let's look at Nevada. So I know locally, there's Technology Business Alliance of Nevada. If you're interested at all in technology, and especially as it relates to more traditional business and marketing or partnering with those companies. The startup scene, you're generally going to find them online, if you're not involved directly, and then you'll need to get involved directly on a personal level. And then I've seen other industries where they're starting to form more niche kind of networks that are in real life meetings, and hopefully with the goal not to just network or just bring in a speaker, but really to help bring those resources in for you know, if you're a service provider or a business in these specific industries. And that's what I would kind of go after, is not only, don't just go broad. It's great to know a lot of other entrepreneurs in the city, wherever it is that you are, but I would try to get into your niche, figuring out through the channels, asking other people what they're part of.
Sure.
So in general, you'll have your Chamber of Commerce that could have a variety of different programs, or at least know where programs are at. Certainly your university in the area will have resources available. In Las Vegas in particular, one of the best places to go for timely information is to just look up Vegas Tech, whether that's on Twitter or Googling it or seeing what's in the news about that. It'll give you a good feel for different events that are going on. There's always opportunities on Meetup to go out and check new organizations. And then also looking at specific areas of interest, whether it's a programming language that you're interested in using or a technology infrastructure that you have available or have heard from. And the main thing is with any of those groups, go in with the right intent. Don't show up on day one looking to sell someone something or get someone to work with you. Start building those relationships, get to know the people, and they will help you get to the right resources for what your needs are once they have a chance to get to know you well enough to know how they can help.
And Gina, how can someone find a mentor like you?
I actually posed this question when I was looking for a mentor myself, and I had, I'm on a listserv of a bunch of solo and small firm attorneys, and everybody just said, just ask. And it was sort of like proposing marriage to somebody that you had just met. It felt like a really daunting thing to just ask somebody to be a mentor, but that's really true. You really can just ask, and a mentor relationship doesn't have to be for a lifetime. It can be for a certain project. It doesn't have to be, where you're talking to the person every single day. It can be just something, I have this particular challenge that I need some guidance through, and then just create, like Andy said, building relationships, getting out into the community, whether if you're in the tech community and you're downtown, that's a great place to start, and you build those relationships. And the way you build the relationships is you give more than you get, or at least that's the intent, and you do what you say you're going to do. And I mean, I hate to knock Vegas because I grew up here, but that's sort of a business model for a lot of people. So whether you're in a tech company or whether you're in a traditional company, a brick and mortar business or something, just follow up, do what you say you're going to do. And focus on how you can be a resource rather than, just handing somebody your card and expecting a referral.
Very well said, Gina. That's great advice from you. And then you will become the resource sooner than later, possibly, because the right people may approach you before you know it. So.
We've said community a lot today, and this has been a great little community for us today. I want to say on behalf of Nevada State Bank, I want to thank our panelists, Gina, Andy, and Jennifer, for presenting us with this valuable information, and thank you to everyone who participated. If you have questions that weren't answered today, we'll make every effort to get you an answer in the next few days. If you'd like to see the webinar again or invite others to see it, a recorded version will be available within 48 hours on nevadasmallbusiness.com. You're also invited to the next Insights webinar on November 14th, which will focus on corporate philanthropy and how it can help your company at the same time helping our community. You can register today at nsbank.com/webinar. As always, registration is free. Thanks again for participating, and have a great day.